You've just woken up in the Delhi Sultanate. Your tongue is dry, your legs are stiff, and someone is already shouting orders in a language you only halfway understand, not the polished grand tales of cavalry charges or silk-draped emperors, but the slow, bone-sore truth of marching, sleeping on broken earth, and praying your camel doesn't spit on your rations. Hey guys, tonight we begin with a journey into the harsh, dusty, and quietly mesmerizing world of the Delhi Sultanate's army. You're about to experience what it might have felt like to be an ordinary soldier in a medieval Islamic empire stretched across northern India, where court poets sang in Persian enemies, gathered at dusty borders, and everyday life was mostly blisters and bureaucracy. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The sun hasn't yet broken the horizon, but the air is already warm and somewhere close. A donkey is braying like it knows something you don't. Around you are Rajputs, Afghans, Turks, Persians, and local converts, all with different accents, jokes, and cooking styles. He says something dry about discipline and then nods to the cook tent, as though that will help. A fight nearly breaks out over who gets the biggest onion. The cook threatens to blind the next man who spits in the pot, and no one laughs. The smell that wafts out is complicated, mostly burnt grain, but with a sour sweetness underneath. You've picked up enough words to barter for lentils, avoid offending anyone's deity, and swearing for dialects. Your sword is curved, a Persian-style shamshir, and your bow is a composite thing strung with horn and sinew. You handle both with care, not out of reverence, but because repairs are expensive and the quartermaster is known to demand bribes and clothes. There's talk of new stipends, gold, maybe even silk if you survive the next campaign. The younger soldiers look hopeful. The older ones just keep sharpening their blades. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Loyalty was fluid, wages were inconsistent, and religion often mattered less than the promise of coin. The drummers start their syncopated rhythm, not quite music, not quite warning, not far, just a drill circuit around the outer camp. Again, someone claims that a sultan once beheaded a soldier for a dull belt buckle. You suspect that's an exaggeration? Probably. The sun is high, your water is low. The sound of hoofbeats echoes from somewhere beyond the palisade. You hope it's not the tax collector again. A Sufi preacher had once sat beneath one, and so now even the flies avoid it. You mutter something impolite under your breath, but only after checking that no one holy is nearby. It's enough to make your thighs ache again. The man behind you keeps stepping on your heel. The man in front of you farts when the wind is wrong. The sun glints off spearheads, off helmet buckles, off 1,000 half-polished surfaces. The man beside you mutters something about honor. Your blanket smells faintly of cumin, sweat, and whatever the last man in this tent died of. You do as you're told, walking stiffly into the pale morning. You race surrounded by the quiet rustle of men getting dressed in the half-dark tunic sleeves, pulled on with sleepy curses, belts buckled, sandals thumped onto sand-packed feet. You've just woken up in a crude barracks tent pitched outside the walled city of Delhi. A few even polish the backs with saffron water, not for any martial purpose, but because they claim it calms the spirit. No one argues with them. Not today. Your sleeping mat is straw, and it has done very little to cushion your back. It tastes faintly metallic, with a hint of wood ash. That means it was boiled. That means you're lucky. He's failing. An older archer helps him, grumbling the whole time about babies with bowels. The cloth is bright red and far to clean. You wonder how long that will last. Someone hands you a cup of tepid water from a cracked vessel. Out beyond the tents, the low horns are sounding long, groaning notes that tell everyone it's time to assemble, stretch, and pretend yesterday's bruises no longer matter. You're part of a mixed infantry division, drawn together from every part of the Sultanate. Your superior officer rides on a white mule that looks like it hates everyone equally. You line up for breakfast, which today is thick, gluey porridge made of millet. Someone's added spice possibly by accident and someone else finds a pebble. The sun climbs higher. You're ordered to oil your weapons. The older men smeared their shields with animal fat to keep them from cracking in the dry heat. You overhear someone whispering that a Rajput noble has arrived to review the troops. Nearby, a boy not more than 15 is trying to knot his turban properly for the first time. You're summoned to formation. No one talks about fear. Historians still argue whether the rank-and-file soldiers of the Delhi Sultanate were primarily mercenaries, loyal house troops, or conscripted farmers forced into service. You march. You long for shade. But the only trees are guarded, sacred, off-limits. When the drill ends, you're told to polish your armor. Later, you return to your tent and collapse, face first into your mat. Your comrade leans over, passes you a dry fig, and mutters, "Only 500 more days until retirement." You both laughed along at that. Tomorrow, you'll march not or drill or die. It's hard to say, but tonight, your job is simply to survive until the next horn blows. You rise again before the sky has fully brightened, the call to formation echoing like a cough in the throat of the earth. The camp is already alive with movements, handles scuffing, blades scraping. Morning rituals unfolding in the usual dance of exhaustion and obedience. You sit cross-legged in the packed dirt. Cradling your queer is a segmented shell of metal plates lacquered in dull brown oil, and edged with rust. It smells like sun-baked iron and goat grease. You apply more oil from a small clay bottle, rubbing it in with your sleeve, watching the fabric stain darker with each pass. Today is a day of armor inspection, which means oaths, sweat, and long hours spent fussing over things the Sultan will never see. The soldier beside you grunts. He's from Gwalior, or says he is, though you've never met anyone else who can confirm it. His armor bears deep gouges from some forgotten skirmish, but he claims they're from a tiger. The commander of your battalion rides a tall horse with a narrow blaze down its nose, and eyes too intelligent for your liking. The man atop it is no fool either. His robes are dyed deep indigo, his boots stitched with gold thread, and on his fingers are rings too many for a soldier, but just enough for a prince. The kind of man who smells faintly of roses and old blood. He says it while chewing a dried tamarind pod, offering you half with the solemnity of a priest. In the distance, the commanders are inspecting ranks. You can hear the thud of hoofbeats slow, deliberate, aristocratic. He has a very sharp smile. He rides with that air particular to seasoned military. Men who were born inside palace walls, relaxed but dangerous, amused but exacting. Here, amid the stacks of mail shirts and arrowheads, the hierarchy softens just enough for complaints to bubble up. One soldier has worn the wrong sash, a grave insult, apparently. The commander does not raise his voice. The boy weeps silently, nose running into his sleeve. Another soldier, one missing 3 fingers, leans against a spear shaft and jokes about how commanders are like cats, elegant, well-groomed, and fond of pouncing without warning. He simply dismounts, walks over, and slices the sash clean off with a small knife. His tent is grand double-walled silk, with decorative lattice panels and a velvet awning embroidered with stars. The stakes are capped in silver, and the entrance is always flanked by the guards wearing scimitars with jeweled hilts. Then he smiles again, returns to his horse, and continues. Some chroniclers describe highly regimented units, while others suggest elite officers were promoted more for poetry and lineage than tactics. The truth likely varied, 1 part strategy, 1 part family favor, and a liberal handful of well-timed bribes. Her hands are bare, painted with henna, moving slowly over a wooden tablet. She reads aloud in Persian, voice low and fluid, like water in a golden bowl. He halts before your unit. His eyes sweep across your ranks like wind over water. He says nothing at first. You keep your gaze respectfully low. Everyone does. Then, in a voice so calm it borders on affectionate, he begins pointing out flaws. Dented greaves, untrimmed beards, a missing strap. The lesson is clear. He does not need to shout. He has steel for that. Likes to have someone read the verses aloud. helps him feel the rhythm, or so he says. As he pauses, the lines between concubine, consort, and courtly companion were often blurred, especially among men of high rank and poetic temperament. He gestures to your breastplate. This piece, was it made in Bukhara? You nod slowly. It was not, but it is old and foreign-looking enough to pass as such. You also make a point to walk past the tent again the next day, a little slower than usual. The commander's tent is lit from within, casting soft silhouettes against the cloth. You hear music and out, or maybe a rebab and something that sounds like laughter. He hums in amusement. Good work maintaining it. That lacquer's seen more suns than half this camp. You say nothing. Praise is rarely offered so plainly. It lingers in the air like incense. He moves on. After the inspection, you gather beneath the supply awning where the armorers and squires mill about. The commanders, 10 flutters. One squire, barely 16, is being scolded for forgetting to polish the buckles on his master's greaves. Someone nearby chuckles. Someone else pretends not to. Historians still argue whether the military command of the Delhi Sultanate operated on strict discipline or calculated chaos. In your experience, respect flows like water, always toward the man with the largest tent and the fewest scars. Later in the afternoon, you're assigned sentry duty beside the commander's quarters. From your angle, you glimpse little, the edge of a writing desk, the curve of a brass lamp, the scent of rose water lingering in the folds of the cloth. And just once you catch sight of a figure sitting cross-legged within, draped in red silk, poring over a scroll. It isn't the commander, it's a woman. Her face is hidden behind a gauze veil. You freeze. She glances up only briefly and says nothing. Later, when you mention this to another guard, he only shrugs. He is a poet, the man mutters. You wonder whether that's all it is. It's no secret that commanders of the Sultanate often traveled with private attendance readers. Musicians, sometimes scribes whose only job was to wear perfume and keep secrets. You're told not to speak of what you saw. You agree. By sundown, the air turns warm and thick. You are not meant to envy your superiors. But tonight, you do. And as you sit down beside the fire, wrapping your cloak around sore shoulders, you wonder whether power is about wealth or armor, or the ability to summon poetry and perfume into a battlefield. The wind shifts, you close your eyes and pretend the music is meant for you. By the time the sun reaches its full height the next day, you're already coated in a fine dusting of yellow-gray sand, sweat pulling at your collar, and your legs aching from a morning spent drilling. The drums beat on, relentless and indifferent, and the scent of sour milk from a nearby rations. Tent lingers in the air like a low insult. It is in this heat and half-exhaustion that something unusual happens. The astrologer arrives. No one quite knows when he entered camp, but word of him spreads faster than the cooks can shout over the pots. By midday, soldiers have begun drifting toward the center circle, pretending to fix sandals or stretch sore backs, all in the hopes of glimpsing the strange, weary man in indigo robes with a beard like tangled vines and fingernails stained with crushed saffron. You watch from the shade of a saddle tent as the astrologer sets up a small table, draped in black cloth. On it, he places a series of odd objects: glass spheres, polished bones, folded scrolls with symbols you don't recognize. He speaks softly to himself in a language that might be Persian or Sanskrit or something older. He looks up suddenly and points at the sky. Mars has taken offense. He says in a tone more theatrical than fearful, and Venus sulks in the arms of a water sign. The men around him nod as if they understand. A few exchange worried glances. One by one, he examines their palms, pokes at their foreheads, asks them when they were born and whether their mother ever dreamt of jackals. You watch as he declares one man destined for greatness, and another doomed to drown in a dry riverbed. He points toward a cluster of soldiers and beckons them forward. When your turn comes, you hesitate, but your sergeant nudges you forward with a grunt. Of sand that turns to honey, of veiled women who vanish when touched. Another says he's mad, once kissed a cobra, lived, and now speaks only in riddles. Some say they were merely tolerated, a nod to the superstition of the lower ranks. Others believe they held real power, advising generals, blessing campaigns, and even suggesting the most auspicious days for battle. Some chroniclers from the era describe armies delaying their advance for entire weeks, simply because Saturn was facing backward. Someone else insists he correctly predicted the outcome of a palace affair, one involving twin sisters, a stolen dagger, and a pet mongoose. The astrologer squints at you. Your moon, he murmurs, has a limp. You blink. They spiral outward in complicated loop stars, crescents, geometric shapes that resemble flowers or weapons, depending on how you squint. He continues. Ignoring your confusion, you dream often. Yes, of fish that speak. You say nothing, but your silence answers for you. He takes your left hand, traces the line of your thumb. His fingers are dry and shockingly cold. A rider approaches who wears the face of no one you know. Bits of string knotted around wrists. Tiny cloth pouches stitched with rose petals and teeth. Some speak quiet blessings over their boots before putting them on. Others leave offerings dates, pebbles, even carved wooden birds outside the astrologer's tent. He carries neither banner nor weapon but brings ruin all the same. Then he sighs. When questioned, he says only, "The moon showed me something. I can't tell you what. Be careful with your feet," he says. Destiny enters through the heel. You return to your tent more confused than enlightened. Around you, soldiers murmur interpretations. Some are fearful, others treat the astrologer as a glorified jester. One man claims the astrologer is an agent of the Sultan himself, sent to sniff out treachery in the guise of mysticism. And you carry a small iron ring in your pocket not for any particular reason, except that it feels slightly heavier than the world around it. Historians still argue about the role of mystics and astrologers in the Delhi Sultanate's military. Later that evening, the astrologer returns. Then, one morning, he is simply gone. Not to speak, but to draw. On the ground near the fire pit, he begins sketching elaborate symbols in ash and crushed rose petals. He burns a pinch of myrrh and mutters to it. You notice that even the officers are watching now, quietly, from beneath their cloth awnings. No one interrupts. When he finally speaks again, his voice is low. There is a shadow on the army, he says. You don't sleep well that night. And when, 3 days later, a group of scouts fails to return for patrol, no sign of battle, no trail, no wreckage, some begin to whisper that the rider has already passed through. It's hard not to notice, in the days that follow, how the soldiers become more careful. Amulets are suddenly more common. No one jokes anymore. One man, a hulking brute of a spearman who used to boast loudly about his immunity to curses, is found at dawn staring into his empty bowl of water, whispering apologies to it. You wonder whether he's been cursed or simply broken by this life. Either explanation feels reasonable, and you, too, begin to change in small ways. You avoid stepping on certain patterns in the sand. You tie your sash with your left hand now, just in case. The astrologer remains in camp for a fortnight, offering no more warnings, only nods and strange, half-sung proverbs. All he leaves behind is a cracked clay bowl filled with dry lavender, and a message carved into a piece of wood. Beware the crescent that rises too soon. No one knows what it means, but everyone remembers it, especially when the next campaign begins. And the moon 3 nights early hangs low and wide in the sky, shaped like a grin made of bone. Your body is aching from the drills, and your thoughts are still tangled in the astrologer as ominous riddles. When something entirely unexpected stirs the air of the camp, a woman walks past the outer barracks. She does not hurry. She does not speak. She walks with the poise of someone used to being watched and even more used to being obeyed. Her garments shimmer faintly in the late afternoon sun, layers of silk, deep violet with gold-threaded edges, so light they move like smoke around her. Her veil is translucent, the kind that doesn't conceal so much as suggest mystery. Around her ankles are tiny bells that do not ring, only shimmer in rhythm with her steps. Every conversation falters. She disappears behind the officer's pavilion into the folds of shadow and canvas, leaving behind the scent of jasmine and something spicier cloves, maybe, or nutmeg heated by skin. Even the horses turn their heads. You stand frozen by your tent flap, a piece of dried fish halfway to your mouth, and then the whispers begin. She's one of the royal companions. No, she's a dancer for the Sultan's birthday. She's a spy. She's cursed. She's his niece. She's no one's. Everyone has seen her. No one knows who she is. The records are full of gaps, and poetry does more concealing than clarifying. One veteran claims that such women courtesans, informants, priestesses in disguise often travel with commanders during long campaigns. Not for pleasure, he insists, but for presence. Power is a performance, after all. She's standing beside a silk-draped palanquin, speaking softly with a guard who looks vaguely terrified. You glimpse the curve of her wrist, bare and pale, and delicate as a rice blossom dot or both. She holds a tiny jar in one hand, something golden inside, with the stopper carved into the shape of a bird. But in private tents, behind jeweled screens, or seated beside their noble patrons at field banquets, some were wives, some were political hostages, some were there for the illusion of courtly order and an otherwise lawless wilderness, like being seen and stored away in someone else's memory. The truth, of course, is far more complicated than, like all things in this army, hidden beneath layers of silk, secrecy, and rank. Later that night, as you gather near the cook fires, with your usual circle of aching backs and hoarse throats, the talk continues. Another man scoffs. If power's a performance, she's the main act. You don't say anything. You're still thinking about the way she moved, how silence seemed to follow her like a private guard. The truth is, elite women did sometimes travel with armies not in ranks or armor. Historians still debate their roles. Were they symbols of prestige, strategic advisors, or distractions dangerously close to scandal? But the soldiers, they remember. Some eyes, he says, seated deeply, and a pair of dark eyes that do not blink. Men scraped from their beds and made to march in straight lines for reasons no one questions too deeply, especially when, the next evening, you're assigned patrol near the inner camp wall and catch sight of her again. Even the captains walk a little slower, as though the shadows might be listening. Her veil is lower tonight. Her sleeves are shorter. Perfume or poison. She turns, slowly, and her gaze meets yours. Only for a moment. It's enough. You feel it like a blow to the chest, not lust. Exactly. Something quieter. You break eye contact. The guard beside her mutters something and leads her into the palanquin. The curtains close. The bells at her ankles do not chime. That night, your dreams are strange. Fragments. A tent with purple lights. A silk veil drifting on water. A bird with no wings. You wait before dawn, cold despite the heat, and spend the rest of the morning chopping firewood without being asked. Later, as the day burns forward, you hear someone say she's left camp. Vanished, escorted away at first light under a silent banner. Or perhaps she never existed at all, and the whole thing was a test of mirage sent by your commander to gauge the discipline of his men. Or perhaps she's still here, behind one of the veiled tents, listening to the camp through a wall of embroidered gauze. Collecting secrets like pressed flowers, theories multiply like ants in summer. The man who once bragged of betting half of Delhi now claims he would not meet her gaze. Even if offered 10 silver dirhams, someone else nods and mutters, "That wasn't perfume. That was memory." Still, life in the camp continues. Horses must be fed, sandals mended, bowstrings tightened. But for the next few days, a strange quiet clings to the barracks. Jokes are whispered, not shouted. Arguments fizzle out before reaching full volume. And you watch the wind and wonder if it still carries the scent of jasmine and cloves. Your body settles into the rhythm of this life not by choice, but by submission. The days blur. Drills, rations, sleepless nights, the occasional scolding from a mounted officer who seems to hover just above the dust like some hawk of noble blood. Today, The rations arrive late. This is never a good sign. You gather near the mess tent, metal bowl in hand, as the first ladlefuls are splashed down. When the food does come, it's heaved into camp in burlap sacks and black and bronze pots. Borne by surly cooks who sweat as heavily as the camels behind them, the stew is recognizable. Lentils, mostly. Bits of fatty mutton, bone shards, unwashed herbs. I'd had it since the Deccan campaign. You take your portion with a murmured thanks, then sit beside a man who is already halfway through his bowl, and chewing with the grim determination of a mule. He tells you without being asked that yesterday he bit into something hard and lost a tooth. Swallowed it by accident. A lucky tooth, he says mournfully. One swears by the shape of the bone. The other says he once knew a butcher who could tell by smell alone. You decide it's probably both, with some onion thrown in to keep anyone from caring too much. You begin to suspect they are more sentient than they let on, vengeful spirits in winged form. You nod and chew more carefully. Some say poison water, others whisper about sorcery, or divine punishment for dishonoring a shrine on the way south. And the still glowing embers of cooking fires are encircled by stories, more pungent than any stew. Some argue that rival factions might indeed poison wells. Others suggest paranoia bred from spoiled rations and too many nights sleeping in your own sweat. You agree. You don't always boil it, but tonight, you will. The sun glares overhead. Flies gather, and not even swatting helps anymore. Across from you, two younger recruits argue about whether the meat in the stew is goat or camel. But as you round a stack of crates, you hear voices. You don't need to prove a well is cursed. You just need to believe it. Not the Sultan, not the Grand Vizier, a lesser son, the youngest. Apparently, he's fled the city, disguised himself as a merchant's boy and slipped into the field camps. Someone tries to spice the pot with dried chili flakes. Someone else claims it's poison. The cook rolls his eyes and dumps in another fistful. By the time the evening meal ends, your stomach is full but not satisfied. The way it always is with food cooked in bulk, with rage, and with ingredients you suspect were never meant to be combined. As night falls, the camp begins its slow metamorphosis. Training grounds turn to gambling circles. Laundry lines become forums for gossip. He wants to taste war, he says. Let him taste dysentery first. You sit on a low stone, watching the sky darken, when someone mentions the wells. Apparently, a runner brought news from another regiment. An entire company fell ill. About love letters intercepted by the palace eunuchs and burned in the rain. A man nearby clutches his water skin tighter and mutters something about boiling everything. Historians still argue whether these recurring rumors of poisoned wells and cursed springs were true, or simply the result of poor sanitation and the ever-present rot of military life. But in this world, uncertainty is more powerful than fact, and the idea that somewhere just possibly a prince walks among you, covered in dust and lies. You walk away from the fires to find a quieter spot, maybe to relieve yourself, maybe to breathe. Softly heated, you pause. It's the officers drunk on their own privacy talking about the prince. No one knows why. One of the officers laughs and calls it a game. The other isn't laughing. He says something about betrayal, about knives sewn into cloaks. You slip away before they notice. That night, sleep comes lightly. You lie on your mat, staring at the tent ceiling, thinking about the taste of the stew, the rumors of the poison wells. The heat today is unbearable, thick as syrup and twice as stubborn. You wake with your tunic clinging to your skin and the taste of salt already on your lips. The flies are more aggressive. The sun rises faster. Even your shadow looks tired. Your first task of the morning is not military, it's latrine duty. The smell arrives before the flies. It's worse than usual today, something between rotting onions and burnt leather. Not glamorous, not noble, but necessary. You're not sure what that means, but you do it anyway. You grab a spade, wrap a cloth around your nose, and trudge toward the edge of camp where the earth is already scarred by past relief. You dig, you shovel. You pour a bucket of water with a pinch of ash over the worst of it, because someone swears it binds the spirits. As you work, you notice something carved into the wooden wall of the latrine hut. Not graffiti exactly. A poem, cruelly scratched, barely legible, probably done with a belt knife. But it's a verse love song, of sorts. Her eyes were to crescents, moonlit and cruel. She walked past my tent and unraveled my rule. I would trade my spear and a week's pay in coin to brush once her veil where the jasmine buds join. You blink. You read it again. You can't help but smirk. Whoever wrote this is either mad or hardcore both, which in this army often means the same thing. They're all in the same voice, melancholy, reverent, aching. You glance around, half expecting someone to be watching, but there is only a lizard sunning itself on a crack jar. Later, back at the mess tent, you whisper the lines to another soldier. He raises his eyebrows. You found one too, he says. A few try writing their own verses in response, only to find them mysteriously erased by morning. Someone claims she leaves rose petals behind as her calling card. Others believe it's a campaign of seduction, deployed through rhyme. Some argue it was confined to the courts and literary salons, while others insist poetry leaked into every level of society, whispered intents. Carved in boredom, composed in the throes of thirst and longing. A few mutter that the verses are traps those who read them to often begin dreaming of her and lose their footing in battle. That evening, you learn there are more verses, scribbled on walls, scrawled on discarded scraps of parchment, etched into the leather lining of someone's helmet, all about the same woman. A way to pretend that you aren't just another name on a future tomb. The one in silk. Some think it's a game. You start to notice things. Men linger by the spots where the poems are found. Someone else claims that's just goat betting. In his hand, a torn scrap of fabric, purple silk, embroidered with gold thread. A few lines, muttered beneath your breath, fragments that come when your mind drifts. You don't even write them down. Still, the myth grows. Historians still debate the role of poetry in the daily lives of soldiers under the Delhi Sultanate. In this army, poetry is survival, a way to make dust feel delicate. One night, while on perimeter patrol, you find another verse, this one carved into a tree, as if the army itself is being written, line by line, into some story that none of you will survive, but all of you hope to appear in. The sword is not sharper than silence, they say, yet her footsteps can sever the edge of my day. You don't tell anyone about this one. You don't know why. In the nights that follow, you begin composing verses of your own. Nothing grand, but somehow they stay with you. The officers pretend not to notice, or perhaps they don't care. Let the soldiers pine. Let them bleed through words instead of each other. One morning, an archer is found asleep beside a tent post, his bow forgotten in the dust. No one claims it. No one punishes him. And the poetry continues, like a second language whispered just beneath the shouts, a rhythm behind the marching. You wake one morning to find a line carved into your tent pole. She passed by my silence and left me a storm. You say nothing. You touch the words once with your fingertips, and then you go on with your day, pretending the line wasn't meant for you. The desert road is long and dry and cruel, not just to your feet, which have blistered inside their worn sandals, or your shoulders, stiff beneath the weight of armor and sack, but to your patience, your memory, your sense of where you end. The dust begins. You're marching again. No destination is named. You are told only that a fort needs reinforcement, or that a border may soon be breached. The details are vague, and that's on purpose. The less you know, the fewer questions you'll be asked when someone else disappears. The caravan of soldiers stretches thin across the road, a snaking line of tired men and stubborn mules. The camels grunt like old philosophers, wise and perpetually annoyed. You begin to walk in rhythm with their sway. Left, right, step, grit, breath. Saying you don't speak much on the road. Conversation takes energy, and energy is best saved for pushing through the heat or scanning the horizon for raiders. Still, you hear things. A merchant was found tied to a tree with saffron shoved in his mouth. A whole village disappeared in the night. A shrine was desecrated, its stone lions headless and the offerings untouched. And then there's the one about the man who walked alone into the desert, following a flute melody no one else could hear. That one haunts you at night. You collapse beneath the open sky, using your shield as a windbreak and your cloak as a pillow. The stars are unblinking, unbothered. They do not care who conquers whom. They do not record the names of foot soldiers in their cosmic ledger, somewhere near your campfire. A man is boiling lentils with dried mango rind. Someone else is sharpening an arrowhead with more devotion than a priest. And then the music begins. Soft, tentative. It's a rebab, one of the stringed instruments that looks like a hollowed out gourd with a neck. The man playing it sits cross-legged, eyes closed, coaxing sound out of animal gut and horsehair. The melody is slow, aching, unembellished. You feel it slide into your ribs like warm tea or old regret. It turns out he used to play for a minor noble in the court of Ghiyasuddin Balban, lost his patronage after a scandal involving a misdelivered letter, and a eunuch with too much free time. Now he's here, born to calluses, entertaining the ghosts that follow marching men. You sit down quietly near the fire. Around you, the soldiers begin to sway. Not in dance, just slightly, with the kind of motion that says, I remember the shape of home. A few hum along, a few weep silently, eyes glittering in the light of cooking coals. One man sings. His voice is cracked and hoarse, but the words carry. They sent me south with coin and cloth to guard a wall of blood and moth. But I would give my blade and breath for one more night and one less death. You stay long after the song ends. The fire burns low. The stars blink, unchanging. Historians still argue about the morale of medieval armies, especially those under the Delhi Sultanate. Was it forged through religion, fear, camaraderie? Perhaps it was held together with music and rumor, with food that blistered the tongue and poetry scratched into shield backs. What you know is this: people do not march for flags. They march for the men beside them and for the hope that they might one day stop marching. As you lie back and stare at the sky, the road ahead fades into dream. You are not a hero. You are not a name that history will remember. But tonight, your feet are still. Your belly is warm, and the song still lingers. In the air like incense, you close your eyes. You almost believe you're safe. The fort, when you finally reach it, is not what you expect. There is no grand gatehouse, no towering stone bastion, just an aging hilltop outpost with cracked walls the color of dried turmeric, and a gate that creaks like an old man's knees. A few archers watch from the parapets, their bows idle, their eyes glazed with boredom or fatigue or something deeper. Inside, the mood is thick. You and your unit shuffle in, boots scuffing against packed earth, sand and sweat clinging to your armor like regrets. A horn sounds somewhere, weak and flat. The commander of the fort, an older man with a limp and a rusted pauldron, greets your own officer with little more than a nod. He doesn't smile. The soldiers stationed here are gaunt, sallow. They speak softly, when they speak at all. Their barracks are lined with herbs strung from the ceilings, not for decoration, but to ward off spirits. So they say, basil, neem, something pungent and bitter. You're given a cot in a cramped corner of the barracks. It smells faintly of mildew and old leather, and the man in the bed next to you stares at the ceiling as if waiting for it to blink. You ask what happened here. He doesn't answer. Later, by the well, you hear whispers about the curse. No one calls it that directly. Of course, they use safer words. Luck, the old trouble, that feeling. But the story comes out in pieces, in murmured fragments and sideways glances. 3 months ago, they say, there was an incident. A strange traveler arrived, some say a merchant, others say a fakir in disguise. He stayed one night, drank from the well, then disappeared into the hills. And that night, the dogs began to howl. Since then, things have gone wrong. Quietly, men slip from the parapets during calm watches. Tools vanish, then reappear bent or broken. Horses wake with foaming mouths and wild eyes. Two soldiers who mocked the story were found days later, one babbling nonsense, the other mute. Now, no one drinks from the well without murmuring a prayer. A few have stopped drinking altogether. You fetch water with trembling hands. One evening, while you clean your gear by lamplight, the old fort commander stops beside you. He looks down at your scabbard, then at your face. Do you dream, he asks. You pause. You nod. He doesn't. He hasn't, he says, in weeks. Not since the visitor. Not since the night the walls seemed to breathe. Historians still debate the role of supernatural belief in military forts. During the Sultanate period, some see it as mere folklore, passed among the lower ranks. Others note that even officers educated, literate men made ritual offerings, consulted holy men, and fasted on certain days to ward off unseen forces. You feel it yourself, now, the press of silence against the inside of your ears. The feeling that someone stands just outside the edge of your vision. At night, the fort groans. Not from the wind, from inside. Wood contracts, stone shifts, and something like breath moves. Through the cracks, you lie on your cot, eyes open, and you wait for morning. The morning breaks not with the sun, but with shouting. You sit bolt upright, boots half off, weapon nowhere nearby. Outside, the camp stirs in confusion, muffled orders, running feet. The metallic clatter of half-awake men trying to look battle-ready. But it's not a raid, not an ambush. It's a theft. A horse, gone. Not just any horse's horse. The commander's prized mare, black as ink and fast as desert wind, with a white mark on her flank shaped like a lotus. Gone from her tether before dawn. No cut rope, no hoof prints, no witnesses. The commander is livid but coldly so. He doesn't shout. He simply surveys the men like a butcher eyeing a pen of sheep. His silence is a blade pressed against the hole. For you line up with the others, dust stinging your eyes. The sun not even fully risen. A fly lands on your cheek. You don't move. One by one, men are questioned, searched, dismissed, or detained. Then come the accusations. A boy from a supply unit no older than 16 is dragged forward. Someone claimed he was near the stables. Someone else swears he is a thief. No one seems certain. The boy trembles, saying only, "I was fetching water." The commander nods. The boy is tied to a post, and the rest of you are ordered to watch. There is no blood, just a punishment of exhaustion and humiliation. Hours left standing, shirtless under the sun, hands bound behind him. A soldier walks in, circles around him, reciting aloud the laws of the camp like a prayer. A man who steals from his kin is not fit to eat among them. A man who hides from justice brings misfortune to the blade. A man who lies to his commander lies also to God. You stop listening after a while. But the boy does not faint. He does not cry. You don't know whether that makes it better or worse. When he's finally untied, he walks away without a word, and no one speaks to him again. Not that night, not the next day. He becomes a ghost in the barracks, unseen, unspoken, but always there. You find yourself wondering whether he took the horse, whether someone else did, whether it ever truly mattered. Later that week, a group of scouts returns from a brief patrol. They're sunburned, grumpy, half-starved, but one of them carries a strip of fabric silk purple, tied to a branch just outside the southern path. They say it was caught on a thorn bush. No sign of who left it, no footprints, just silk, and that same faint scent of jasmine and clove. You remember the woman, the veil, the poems carved in strange places. The rumors. And now, silk. The camp falls quiet again. Some believe she's nearby, some believe she never left. A few begin to suggest she took the horse, vanished into the hills, riding under the moonlight. A blade hidden in her sash and a purpose no one dares guess aloud. The commander does not comment, but his temper sharpens. Drills grow longer, meals grow shorter. Rest becomes a luxury ration only to the obedient. You endure it all with the same numb patience you've grown over the months. An armor of indifference more protective than any mail shirt, Historians still puzzle over the concept of justice in the Sultanate army. Was it rigid and by the book, arbitrary and brutal, or something more performative, punishments as warnings? Spectacles meant to reaffirm order rather than uncover truth. Here, you realize justice is not about right or wrong. It's about power and spectacle, and reminding the soldiers that you are never beyond the reach of eyes. The night before sleep finds you, you carve something small into the post near your cot. Not a verse, just a word. Gone. You don't know if you mean the horse, the boy, the woman, or some part of yourself. But the word feels right. The summer rains arrive without warning. One moment the sky is a dull brass dome above your head, and the next it opens, a sudden, glorious downpour. The first drop hits your brow like a blessing, then another, then 1,000 more, until the dust around your boots turns dark, and then soft, and then thick as curdled milk. You tilt your face upward. You don't care that your tunic clings to your chest like wet bark. You don't care that your hair drips into your eyes. The entire camp exhales at once, soldiers rushing from tents to let themselves be washed. If only for a moment. You haven't seen this many men smile in weeks. But the joy is short-lived. Rain in the Sultanate's northern border forts is no mere refreshment. It's disruption. Mud creeps into everything: boots, weapons, food stores. The leather cracks. The wooden walls bloat. The tents begin to sag like aging faces. And worse, it brings them out. The worms, the ones that curl from under the latrine, trenches and twist into bowls left unattended. Thin white things, like threads with teeth. And the beetles, too hard-shelled and iridescent, chewing their way through sackcloth and even parchment. The rain cleans nothing for long. It just reveals what's already rotting. You help your tent mates dig new trenches, raise cots on stacked stones, salvage what can be dried. Your hands are raw by the end of it, your knees caked in the kind of mud that stinks faintly of old meat. At night, your dreams return. Not dreams, really just fragments. You see her again, the woman in violet, except now she's in armor, not real armor, silk shaped like it, dyed crimson. Wet from rain, she holds a curved dagger and a tiny vial. She walks past the same stables where the horse vanished, only now the stables are on fire. You wake with your heart pounding, breath shallow. Someone else across the barracks groans and sits up. You're not the only one who dreams strange things these days. The next morning, news spreads that a patrol was lost in the hills during the storm. Not killed, not attacked, just lost. Vanished. The commander says it was the weather. Maps turned to pulp. Compass needles rusted. Easy to misstep. But the cook shakes his head. The hills don't take men. Something in them does. And then he tells you a story. He says that long before the Sultan's banners were planted here, the hills belonged to a clan of dancers, women who wove silk and moonlight into spells. They were said to move in patterns that could summon storms or confuse entire battalions. One sultan tried to build a fortress there. This one, perhaps, he sent soldiers to subdue the clan. They all vanished except one, he says, who returned. With his eyes sewn shut. The cook chuckles softly as he stirs lentils. That's just old hill talk. He adds, but you notice he ties a black thread around his wrist after he says it. Historians argue over these tales whether they reflect real resistance movements, folk memory, or simply the need to explain the inexplicable. Did such a clan exist? Were they sorceresses, rebels, or were they just women whose stories were twisted by the soldiers who feared them? You don't know. But that night, just before the oil lamps are doused, someone finds a new verse etched into the clay of a rain-drenched wall. She danced in the flood with her hair unbound. Each step was a spell, each breath a sound. They followed her deep into rain and mist, and none came back with a name or a fist. You read it twice, then you lie back on your cot, and you listen to the rain. The rain ends as suddenly as it began. The sun returns, filtered through silver clouds, and the mud begins to dry into thick, cracking cakes beneath your sandals. What once sucked at your heels now flakes off in dusty scrolls. But the air has changed. It smells of wet stone and mold and the beginning of rot. And the silence lingers. Since the patrol vanished, the camp has gone strangely quiet. The usual arguing, coughing, dice games, and poorly sung ballads have softened. Even the horses seem subdued, snorting less, ears twitching at shadows. The commander calls for a morning muster. You line up with the others, standing at attention while steam rises from the wet ground. He is holding a scroll. It bears the Sultan's seal reel, not a forgery this time. His voice is clear, sharp, almost bored. A dignitary is coming, not just any dignitary, a vizier's cousin, a man with a long name and a longer list of titles. He is expected to arrive within the week. You and your fellows don't know whether to feel dread or excitement. These people, the courtly ones, they are not like you. They wear perfume even when riding through sewage. They speak in metaphors. They carry tiny jeweled blades not for battle, but for peeling fruit in a way that shows off their rings. The last time such a man visited, the latrines were painted. Painted, no one remembers what color. Preparations begin immediately. You are assigned to a cleaning detail. This means scrubbing the stables until the floors shine impossible, finding clean fabric to hang from the gates rare, and carrying buckets of scent-soaked water to splash near the entrance. The mixture smells like lavender, burnt sugar, and something medicinal. You nearly faint from it. By the third day, someone tries to polish a stone wall. Another arranges bowls of fruit in symmetrical piles. A soldier you barely know is reassigned to stand near the gate holding an oil lantern. A noble posture. He has no idea what that means. Then word comes. The dignitary travels with companions. Artists, secretaries, servants, and a woman, not a wife, not a daughter, a scholar. A woman of taste and rhetoric, they say. She writes poems about war and commands an escort of 10. You are stunned. Such women exist, of course, in Delhi's elite circles, among the literati, the courts, the academies. But to travel out here, to this rain-soaked ruin of a fort, the whispers begin again. Could she be her, the woman in silk, the one from before, the one whose veil drifted like smoke and whose perfume lingered longer than memory? No one says it out loud. But you think it. Every man does. Historians still debate the nature of educated women under the Sultanate. While some are secluded behind palace screens, others compose celebrated verse, advised rulers, or engage in court politics through metaphor and marriage. The rare ones, those who traveled, were often mythologized even while they lived. The day before the visitors arrive, you are assigned to guard the southern road. Not glamorous, but not the latrines either. You stand for hours, leaning against your spear, watching the horizon melt into haze. Dust coils in lazy spirals. The sun pulses against your helmet. And then hooves. You hear them first, then the shimmer of silk banners, the flash of polished wood, a procession, slow and precise. Horses with velvet saddles, men with waxed mustaches and perfectly creased robes. A covered palanquin swaying gently near the rear. You watch as it passes. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, you think you see a hand draw back the curtain. Fingers, slender and unloved. Eyes, shadowed and intent. A face not fully shown. Just the impression of one behind gauze and sun-dashed silk. Then it's gone. You stand still long after they have passed. That night, you find a new verse scratched into the wood near the mess tent. The storm returns, not with thunder or blade, but in laughter, soft-spoken and glances half-made. You read it, memorize it, and sleep without dreams. The dignitary's party settles into the fort like silk poured over stone, beautiful, disruptive, and hard to ignore. They take the upper western wing, a part of the fort no ordinary soldier ever enters unless summoned or punished. New curtains are hung. Perfumed oils are burned. The air begins to smell of cardamom and rosewood instead of mildew and rust. You're not told what the dignitary is doing here. You only hear fragments. He's here to inspect the border, to write a report, to whisper into the commander's ear. Whatever his true purpose. The commander begins walking with stiffer posture. Officers polish their belts. Even the cook starts wearing shoes. Then there's the woman. She is seen rarely. Always veiled. Always flanked by the guards whose armor glints like it was forged from dusk. But you catch glimpses. Once, crossing the courtyard, her silhouette, a moving shadow behind embroidered gauze. Another time, her voice, low, measured, and trailing off into laughter soft as ash. You can't hear the words, but you feel them, somehow. And then, one evening, you see her properly. She's seated in the upper terrace garden such as it is. A patch of dry vines and a pomegranate tree that never bears fruit. The sky is pink with late sun, the walls casting long shadows. She's reading. You are on your way to collect water. You pause. She looks up. It's not a dramatic moment. No thunder. No sudden gust of wind. Just a quiet gaze. Curious. Not startled. Her veil is lowered, but not enough to hide the shape of her mouth. Her lips move slightly, maybe in greeting, maybe reciting a line from whatever she's reading. Then one of her guards shifts, and the moment passes. But something in you stirs. Later, back at the barracks, someone swears she was once married to a prince who drowned during a storm at sea. Someone else says she's been writing a book about military life, real stories, not the romantic kind. Someone else says she drinks only from silver and prays 5 times a day without fail. You don't speak, but that night, near the latrines, you find another verse etched into the corner of the outer wall. She sits where no sword would dare to rest, with ink on her sleeve and light on her breast. 1,000 men march for flags and flame, but she'd make a war with a whispered name. You trace the lines with your fingertip. Historians continue to puzzle over women like her, educated, mobile, independent within a rigid court system. Were they truly empowered, or simply ornamented with borrowed prestige? Did they act freely or through the permissions of powerful fathers and husbands? And yet, the writings left behind speak for themselves. In some cases, literally, there are surviving ghazals, essays, travelogues penned by such women, some anonymous, some bold enough to sign their names. Their voices still echo, even if history often tried to lower the volume. The next morning, you see her again. Briefly. This time, she's walking through the lower courtyard, her veil entirely drawn across her face. Still, you know it's her, not just from the walk, but from the way the space around her seems to pause. Even the wind seems unsure of itself. And in her hand, for just a moment, you glimpse something unexpected. A soldier's journal. Not a courtly ledger or scroll of verse. Common soldier's personal diary, wrapped in rough linen and tied with cord. She holds it gently. Like something precious, the rumor spreads by afternoon. She's collecting stories. She's writing a history of the border regiments, what it's like to live here, die here, be forgotten here. She's asking soldiers to tell the truth. Some go willingly, others hide. But deep down, you want to speak with her, not to be remembered, but because for the first time in months you think someone might actually be listening. The invitation arrives in the most unexpected of ways. You find it beneath your cot, wrapped in silk the color of dusted lilac, folded with precise corners, sealed with a simple thumbprint of rose wax, no insignia, no flourish, just a line written, in ink that smells faintly of cloves. You may speak freely. No ranks here, no punishments, only memory. Your name is not on it, but somehow, you know it is meant for you. You spend the day in silence. You do your drills. You clean your boots. You eat lentils that taste like ash and cumin. But your hands are not steady. You keep wondering what you will say, what you will not say. By nightfall, you're told to report to the western terrace, the very place where she reads in the late sun. The guards of the stairway nod without expression, stepping aside as you pass. You climb slowly, aware of your own sweat, your breath, The dull rhythm of your heart. She is already there. No veil tonight, just a shawl drawn loosely around her shoulders. Her hair is braided and coiled like calligraphy at the nape of her neck. She sits on a low cushion, ink-stained fingers resting on a leather-bound book. A single lamp flickers beside her. She gestures for you to sit, and you do. The night is cool, and for once, quiet. No coughing from the barracks, no shouted orders, just the distant whisper of wind through pomegranate leaves. You wait for her to speak. Instead, she passes you a bowl of cardamom tea, hot, milky, fragrant. Then she opens her book and places it between you. Blank pages. You realize this is not her book, not yet. It will be yours. You talk, not with eloquence, not with poetry, just plain words. Halting at first, then more freely. You tell her about the first week you arrived, about the march, the flies, the stew that never truly cools, about the stolen horse, the boy who stood tied to the post, about the poems on the walls. She says nothing, just writes, and listens. Her pen moves like silk on skin, smooth, unhurried, as if every word you say is already known to her, and she's just waiting for you to hear it from your own mouth. Then you say something you hadn't meant to. You speak of the dreams, the woman with the dagger and the storm-colored eyes, the silk veil, the scent of jasmine. The feeling that someone was always watching, but not unkindly, like a question you can't answer. She pauses her writing, then looks up, and in a voice softer than the wind, she says, "There are many ways to survive war. Dreaming is one." You don't ask what she means. You don't need to. Historians, centuries later, will write of this unnamed woman who appeared at forts and garrisons across the Sultanate. Some say she was an emissary for the viziers, others, a wandering scholar, collecting oral histories. A few insist she was a ghost and echo of the stories themselves, summoned by those in deepest need of being heard. None agree on her name, but the stories remain. You speak with her until your tea is gone, the lamp burned low. Then she closes the book gently and says, "Your words will live longer than your wounds." You nod, not knowing how to reply. As you descend the stairs, you hear a soft line sung behind you. You turn, but she is already gone. The next morning, you find your cot swept clean, a small bundle wrapped in fine cloth placed neatly by your head. Inside is a page, written in her hand. He marched for no reason and bled without fame, but someone once heard him and wrote down his name. You don't tell anyone, but you tuck the page into your shirt near your heart, and for the first time in a long while, you feel real. Something shifts in the camp after the night. It's subtle, no parade, no proclamation, but real. Orders are delivered with less venom. Officers pause a moment longer before barking commands. Even the commander seems quieter, not softer, but less brittle, as if the tension in his spine has loosened by a single thread. The dignitary continues his inspection, though no one knows what he's really inspecting. He spends most days cloistered in the map room with the 4 senior scribes. Rumors abound. He's planning a campaign into Rajput territory. He's writing a treatise on logistics. He's searching for signs of sedition. But the soldiers know the truth. It's the woman who's listening. More men are invited to speak with her, not all accept. Some are too proud or too afraid of saying the wrong thing. But others go, and when they return, they're changed not visibly, but inwardly. A calmness in the way they clean their swords, a thoughtfulness in the way they chew their bread. One man even starts writing his own verses, terrible, clumsy things full of misplaced rhymes and mixed metaphors. But he smiles as he recites them, and no one mocks him. One afternoon, while cleaning the perimeter wall, you hear a young archer murmuring lines under his breath. When you ask, he shrugs and says, "She said the hardest part of war is forgetting who you were before it." You think about that for days. Then something stranger happens. The verses on the walls begin to vanish. Not all at once, but steadily. The poems carved into wood, scratched into clay, scrawled beneath cots they're being wiped clean. Not painted over or removed by command, just gone in their place. New lines appear, more elegant, sharper, as if written by someone practiced. Not the confused scrawl of sleepless men, but something deliberate. One line near the mess tent reads, "The ink we shed may outlast the blade, if written in silence. If written unafraid." You ask the guards if it's her doing. They don't answer. One of them simply looks at you and says, "Do you know her name?" You don single quotes the dot no one does. She has been here nearly 2 weeks, and still no one dares speak her name aloud, as if doing so might dispel her, or offend her, or awaken something you were not prepared to understand. Historians often note how unnamed women haunt the edges of empire and records. They are a concubine, a scribe's daughter, a mysterious guest. They are rarely named, and yet their influence echoes through architecture, letters, and policy shifts that cannot be explained without them. She has become one of those women. One night, while on gate watch, you see her standing alone near the stables. No guards. No veil. She gazes at the horizon, her hands clasped behind her back, the wind playing with the loose ends of her shawl. The moonlight gilds the hem of her robe. She looks like a statue carved from dust and memory. You don't approach her. But when you return to your cot, you find another slip of parchment folded beneath your blanket. No verse, just a question. What would you carry home if you had the choice? You lie awake for hours thinking about the dot. What would you carry home? The dagger from your first campaign, the page she gave you, the handful of verses, or just the fact that someone, at long last, asked the question. By morning, you still have no answer. But for the first time, you feel the shape of one beginning to form. The woman leaves without ceremony. No horn, no farewell, no final audience with the soldiers she listened to so patiently. One morning she is there, her silhouette still casting cool shadow on the terrace wall, and by evening, she is gone. You hear about it from the stable master, who shrugs and mutters, "Left at dawn." Quiet as perfume. Her guards mounted up with mechanical grace. Her palanquin creaked gently. She did not look back. You don't believe it until you see the terrace garden yourself. Empty. The cushion gone. The ink lamp snuffed. Even the old pomegranate tree seems somehow more brittle. The strange thing is no one talks about her now. The whispers vanish as quickly as they began. The walls where the verses once lived are scrubbed clean again. New orders are given. Drills resume. Is as if she never came. But you know better. So do others. Because in the days that follow, something peculiar happens in the barracks. Men begin writing again. Not just verses scratched in corners, but full pages. Notes folded into boots, lines sewn into the seams of tunics. One man, usually silent as stone, now speaks in similes comparing dust storms to angry mothers and sword drills to failed poetry. You're assigned to courier duty for 3 days, a dull task involving endless walking between buildings. But it gives you time to see things. The cook now hums as he stirs. The boy who was once tied to the punishment post has begun carving birds into the handles of old spears. A sergeant with a broken nose tells stories at night not of battle, but of a village festival he once attended, where he danced badly and fell in love with a merchant's daughter, who smelled of cardamom and onions. And you find yourself answering the question she left behind. What would you carry home if you had the choice? Not weapons, not medals. You would carry the story, the full, absurd, brutal, beautiful story of what it meant to march here, to serve here, to disappear into this dusty corner of history. Like so many before you, you start writing. At first, in your head, then on scraps of cloth, bits of wood, the smooth side of a broken shield. You write about the stolen horse, the silk tied to the branch, the firelit songs, the boy who didn't cry, about the woman who came like a rumor and left behind a silence so heavy it changed the shape of sound. Historians will later puzzle over a strange cluster of poetic fragments that emerged from this fort. In the early 14th century, anonymous lines, unsigned verses, scattered across centuries' worth of archives. Most will be dismissed as folklore, some will be quoted in footnotes. One will be carved into a temple wall in Delhi, centuries later, beneath a relief of soldiers. Marching into rain, she came with no title, no banner, no spear. But we wrote her in verses so she would stay near. That one is yours. But for now, you scratch it into the underside of your cot. Just for you. Just in case someone else comes looking. The quiet that follows her departure is not the same as before. It's thicker, stranger, not emptier, but suspended, as though the entire fort is holding its breath, waiting for something that no one can name. The dignitary remains for a few more days. He stops inspecting, stops demanding, mostly stays in his quarters, dictating letters or staring at the dry hills beyond the gate. When he finally leaves, there's no ceremony for him either. A small escort, no banners, no farewell speech, just another rider disappearing down a long, dry road with their departure. The fort sinks back into its rhythms. Except the rhythms are off now, not broken but changed. The commander becomes unpredictable. He cancels a punishment drill without explanation, issues new boots to a group of infantrymen who hadn't requested them, walks alone at night, staring at the stars as if listening for them to speak. You see him once near the barracks wall, reading a scrap of paper someone left tucked under a stone. You never knew he could read poetry. Maybe he didn't either. Soon, new arrivals come, recruits from the capital, young men with polished accents and poor muscle tone. They struggle to adjust. One of them asks where to find the library. You laugh so hard you nearly choke on your lentils. But what strikes you is how the veterans treat these new men, not with cruelty, not with hazing, but with an odd gentleness. They teach them the drills, show them how to layer cloth under chainmail to keep from blistering, explain which walls to avoid during high sun. One even sits with a new recruit and helps him write a letter home slowly, carefully, correcting his spelling without mocking it. You realize something. You've become the old soldier now, the quiet one, the one who knows the paths in the hills and where the ghosts tend to whisper, the one the younger men glance toward when the officers bark impossible orders. You're not sure when that happened, but it is. One afternoon, while sharpening your blade in the shadow of the stable arch, a new recruit asks you if it's true. If what's true, you say. He looks around, then whispers that a woman came here and changed everything. You don't answer. Instead, you toss him the whetstone, sharpen it properly. You say, and maybe you'll live long enough to find out. He grins like a boy, and you turn back to your blade. Historians have long debated the true effects of women at the margins of imperial military life. Did they soften the soldiers, civilize them, distract them, or did they simply remind them that war was not the only shape a life could take? No consensus ever emerges. But here, in this fort that once smelled of ash and silence, something delicate has taken root. You see it in how a man places a flower on the cot of a fallen comrade, and how letters are now folded neatly instead of crumpled, and how someone tied a line of verse above the well. When no one watched, we bloomed in rust. Not from glory, but from trust. It's unsigned. But you recognize the rhythm. Yours. And someone else's. The scent of jasmine drifts across your memory, unbidden. You look up at the sky. It's not brighter, but you can see further. The seasons shift without announcement. One morning, the wind is cooler than you expect. The sky clearer. The dust smells different, less like rot, more like stone baked clean. You blink at the horizon and realize you've lived through another summer. You survived. Not with triumph or fanfare. Just endurance. That's what the Delhi Sultanate's army asks of you. Not bravery, not brilliance, not even loyalty. Just that you wait, drill, eat, bleed, and lie still enough not to be noticed when the wrong eyes pass. But now, you're being noticed. A letter arrives, not for you directly. No one sends you letters. But for the garrison, addressed in a careful hand, sealed with a crescent emblem that no one recognizes. It contains a request. A request for records. Specifically, personal accounts, field memories, fragments of soldier poetry. The letter speaks of collecting the soul of the border, of preserving the ink breath of the forgotten. It reads like something she would write. The commander holds it up before the morning muster. Doesn't say much, just, if any of you feel like writing, now's your chance. Then he walks off. You think it's a joke, but that afternoon, you see men at tables with borrowed ink and shaking hands. One writes a song about sleeping under armor. Another sketches the shape of the hills and annotates them with curses. Even the cook writes something, just a recipe for lentils, with a note. For when you miss the dirt, you sit for hours staring at a blank page. What would you say? You could write about the punishments, the rain, the woman in violet, the boy who didn't scream, the commander's rare smile, the poem carved into the floor beneath your cot. But instead, you write this: we are not brave. We are not tragic. We're just waiting to be remembered properly. You don't sign it. You leave it in the stack. Historians later find these letters, most unsigned, some anonymous by choice, others because the names faded with time or were never written to begin with. But they piece together something extraordinary: an interior world of the Sultanate's forgotten infantry, their songs, their jokes, their fears, their quiet rebellions, and their unexpected tenderness. No one knows who initiated the archive project. Some say it was the dignitary's idea. Others suspect it came from the poet-scholar with the jasmine-scented ink. You don't care who gets credit. You just care that it happened. That someone wrote it down. That someone, somewhere, might one day say your name, not with glory, but with understanding. Late one night, while cleaning your armor by moonlight, you find a ribbon tangled around your daggers held. Silk, violet, frayed at the edge. No note, no witness. You smile. Then you fold it carefully, tuck it into your pack beside the folded verse, and whisper to no one, "Thank you." You don't notice the hornets until the third sting. The first feels like a hot nail in your forearm. The second catches your ankle just above the boot. By the time the third strikes square on your neck, you're already cursing and swatting. Like a madman, stumbling out of the storage room into the blinding sun. They're everywhere, a swarm. Angry, golden, loud as war drums in your ear. Someone yells. Another soldier flings a bucket of water into the air, as if hoping to baptize the problem into submission. A lance is swung wildly. Bread rolls fly in every direction. Chaos. The hornets had built a nest in the roof beams, fat, twisted, throbbing like a second heart in the wood. No one noticed until the dry season heat cracked open the thatch and stirred their fury. Eventually, someone lights a torch. Smoke clears them. Slowly, stubbornly, like bad luck leaving the room. You sit under the stable arch, sucking air through your teeth, ankle wrapped in a cloth someone soaked in vinegar. Your skin pulses, throat tight. You're not dying, but you're very aware of being alive in all the wrong ways. Beside you, the youngest recruit cries without sound, tears tracking mud down his cheeks. You hand him a water skin and say nothing. That night, a medic comes by. His hands are gentler than you'd expect. He doesn't ask how you feel, just hums as he dabs a strange smelling paste onto the stings. It smells like crushed mint, ashes, and cumin. He tells you something strange. Sultanate. He begins. Once shut himself in a dark room for 10 days after being stung on the tongue by a wasp hiding in his mango. You laugh despite yourself. Did he survive? Oh, he lived. But he never trusted fruit again. You both chuckle. Historians don't record the hornets, not the stings, or the tears, or the laughing under starlight beside the old stable wall. But the verse that appears the next morning is remembered. Not every battle draws blood or blade. Some are fought in the silence hornets made. I did not run, though I surely wept, and in that pain. A strange truth slept. The verse is scrawled on the underside of a shield rack. Someone copies it onto a drum skin. Another hums a melody to match soon. It becomes a marching song sung low, so the officers don't hear. You wonder if she would have liked it. You wonder if she planted the verse herself through some strange, whispering chain of ink and rumor. Or maybe this one was yours. And in a place where survival is measured in how little you feel, that kind of sting is almost welcome. You wake one morning to the sound of drums, not for battle, but for death. The cadence is different, slower, a double beat, then silence. A rhythm that drags its feet through the dawn air like someone carrying too much on their back. You dress quickly. Someone has died in the night. You don't know who yet, but the barracks already feels heavier. Conversations are quiet. The mess line moves slowly. Even the flies hover in narrower circles. You learn the name before breakfast. Nasir. The boy from the lower bunks. The one who never tied his sandals right. Who carved the wooden birds? Who asked whether the moon looked different from the capital? A fever took him. Not sudden, but unnoticed. A few days of chills, of whispering dreams. The kind the medics ignore until the skin goes gray at the edges. By the time anyone realized, he was already drifting. You helped him sharpen his blade just last week. You sit with the others on the edge of the yard, where the body is wrapped. No lavish rites, just a clean cloth. A stone tied to the ankles to keep him grounded as the prayers rise. The commander stands in silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, he steps forward. He takes a small paper from his belt folded twice. The edge is soft from where and reads, not a prayer, a poem. He wrote no glory into his days, no medals hung, no songs to praise. But quietly, when no one spoke, he carved a bird from cedar oak. Now, when we march and don't look back, the bird will ride upon each pack, a weightless thing in fields of dust, a friend we lost, and still we trust. No one speaks after. You help carry the bundle, not to a graveyard, there isn't one, just the southern slope, where stones are soft and the earth won't fight you to. Hard, you dig with a borrowed shovel. The handle is worn smooth by the hands of other soldiers who've done this too often. When the bundle is lowered, someone places one of Nasir's carved birds beside him. You don't know who. That night, someone else finishes the poem. The final two lines appear on the inner wall near the bathhouse. He marched ahead where silence calls, and left his name between the walls. You lie awake longer than usual. Not because of fear, but because you can't stop thinking of what you haven't said yet, what you haven't written. Historians rarely mark the deaths of common foot soldiers. They vanish in lists, counted in tallies, their lives absorbed into the geometry of battle. But sometimes, when the lines rhyme just right, one name holds, not for glory. Just for remembrance. Just for the echo. You pick up your own scrap of cloth. And begin. The heat returns without mercy. By midday, your breath feels like boiled silk in your throat. The dust clings to your skin like a second, grittier layer of flesh. Helmets scorch your scalp. Chainmail brands your collarbone. Even the shadows retreat. From the yard, curling inward like wilted leaves. Drills are shortened, not out of mercy, but because the commanders know heat stroke ruins a man quicker than sword play. You're told to hydrate, then given a ladle and half a pot of lukewarm water. That smells faintly of old copper and cumin. Someone collapses near the latrines. No one speaks. You retreat to the courtyard well, as water is slow to draw, but shaded by the broken arch of what was once a shrine, some goddess whose name no one remembers. A few petals still lie in the cracks of the stone where someone has placed them, half hoping, half remembering. You lower the bucket and stop, because carved faintly into the lip of the stone, you see new writing. Not yours, not Nasir's, hers. You'd recognize the curve of that script anywhere. The sun forgets the names it burns, but we remember when it turns. And thirst. A name is water still, soft on the tongue, sharp on the will. Your throat tightens. No signature. Just those four lines, waiting like a cool cloth for the fevered. You sit on the edge of the well for longer than you should. Long enough that the commander's shadow pauses, then moves on without a word. By evening, the light changes. Not cooler but stranger, softer, more amber. The sky turns that shade of worn copper you only see a few times each year. When the air grows so still even the birds disappear, and with that stillness comes a visitor. He arrives just before supper, not on horseback, not in a gilded litter, just walking, alone, thus on his boots and a scroll case at his hip. A scribe. No one knows who summoned him, but he carries a list. He asks for names. Not of the living, but the dead specifically, those who died here at this fort, in this garrison, over the last 10 years. He wants their stories, their habits, their favorite foods, what they complained about. You and your brothers in arms blink at him like he's sunstruck. Why? Someone finally asks. The scribe just shrugs. I'm writing a book, he says. A different kind of war record. Someone laughs bitterly. You mean poetry? Exactly, says the scribe, without irony. You invite him to sit by the wall, and the stories begin. The man who shaved only half his face before battle, the archer who wept whenever he saw ducks, the soldier who stole a ceremonial banner just to use it as a blanket. You speak of Nasser and his birds, of verses in the latrine, of a woman in violet who never gave her name. The scribe listens, writes, smiles, but never laughs. At the end, he says, you've remembered them better than any tomb ever could. And with that, he leaves. No ceremony. No speech. Just a man walking into the same heat he walked out of. You sit in silence, feeling the sweat cool on your spine. That night, someone leaves a new offering at the foot of the shrine. Not petals this time, but a sliver of parchment, pinned gently with a broken arrowhead. It reads, we waited for someone to see us. Now, even in the dust, we glow a little. Sleep becomes strange, not restless but thick, like molasses poured into the corners of your brain. You dream, but not in clear stories. Shapes drift, voices whisper. Sometimes you hear her laughter, distant and warm, as though it's coming from the next room or the next life. One night, you dream of the courtyard filled with light, not sunlight, but something softer, silver blue, like moonlight that has forgotten how to leave. In the center, a scroll lies open, and every line is written in different hands, some neat, some frantic, some barely legible, and in the corner, hers. You reach to touch the parchment, and wake to find your fingers curled against your chest, like you were still holding a pen. You lie there for a while, blinking at the ceiling, until a familiar scent finds you. Jasmine and ash. You sit up, heart steady, but alert. There's a new verse carved into the underside of your cot. Not all who WRIT must sign their name, but those who do, rewrite the flame. A story kept is never lost, though memory fades and it knows cost. You breathe out slowly. There are fewer men in the barracks now. Some transferred, some discharged. A few simply disappeared, faded into the landscape like moths into a dust-colored cloth. The newer recruits are quieter around you. Some of them call you Eusted, though you've never trained them. You think they just mean it with respect. One, a boy from the western ranges, asks if the stories are true. Which ones? You ask. He hesitates. The woman, the birds, the poems, the listening. You look at him for a long moment, then answer with another question. Do you remember the first verse you ever heard? He nods. Then it's true, you say. Later, in the mess, someone sings a new song. It's low, drawn out, and uses strange scales notes that slant sideways like sand across stone. You've never heard it before, but you know what it means. You recognize pieces of her words in it, buried like bone beneath silk. That night, you find a piece of slate on your bunk. Your name is carved into it, beneath it. Just one sentence, carried home by memory. No signature, no flourish. But you know not the thing about being remembered, you think, isn't whether the world says your name, it's whether your name still means something when they do. You take the slate dot and carve a line beneath the one she left dot and offered back by ink and dust. You are transferred dot, no warning, no ceremony, just a name on a list. Handed down by a courier with tired eyes and no time for questions. You're to report east past the dried rivers, through the salt plains, toward a fortress near the desert's edge. A new command, new faces, new dust, the same hunger. Your pack is light. You take only what matters, your blade, your water skin, a few folded verses, and the violet ribbon tucked between the pages of your half-filled journal. You leave the cot behind, but not before you run your fingers one last time over the poem beneath it, the one you carved, the one no one else ever claimed. She wrote the war in gentler words and taught us how to sing like birds. You don't cry, but your chest aches with something older than sadness. The men gather before your departure. Quiet nods, a few awkward pats on the back. One soldier new, barely 17, presses a folded cloth into your hand. Inside is a drawing, a bird, wings, open, beak filled with verse, no signature. But you smile, the march is long. Heat coils around you like a snake, too lazy to strike. Your boots wear thinner with every mile. You sleep under thorn trees. Dream of words floating through smoke. Wake to wine that smells of sun-baked stone. You arrive at the new outpost by dusk, smaller, rougher. No pomegranate tree, just a yard of hard-packed dirt and a row of cots so crooked they look like teeth missing from a grin. The new commander eyes you, doesn't ask for papers, just says, "You can read." You nod. He jerks his head toward the rear building. Then you're the new quartermaster. And that's the no sword, no command, just ledgers and supplies. Lists of rice and oil, and how many wheels squeak when rolled. You spend your first week in silence. The soldiers here are tense, suspicious. You don't blame them. No one trusts a man who arrives with a blank reputation. But something strange begins to happen. One night, a verse appears, scratched gently into the inside of a latrine. Dort crude meter. Terrible rhyme, but familiar pain. You add a line beneath it. The next night, another appears. This time, a verse near the mess pot. I eat the fire, then swallow ash, the lentils boil. My hopes abash, you laugh out loud and reply. But eat we must, and march we will, until the moon forgets the hill. Soon, the men notice. One asks, you the poet. You shrug. No, just passing it along. And just like that, the stories begin again. Historians won't mark your name, not in bold ink, not in official scrolls, but the verses will carry you through desert outposts and mountain passes, through oil-stained barracks and rain-slicked tents. You'll become the whisper, the one who writes, the one who remembers, the one who listened once, long ago, and never stopped. And in the quietest hour of night, you'll still hear her voice. Not a memory, but a reminder that stories survive even where men forget to, that names written in silence echo longest. The ledger is heavier than any sword you've ever carried, not in weight, but in meaning. Every line you ink feels like a spell flower. Lentils, oil, cloth, boots, names attached to numbers. Numbers to stories. A soldier's ration of rice becomes his one hot meal before frost sets in. A missing pair of sandals means frostbite, not accounting error. You write carefully now, not always. Your pen scratches with the precision of memory. You pause before marking the cause of loss. You make quiet notes when someone limps or coughs too hard. You are no longer merely the keeper of supplies. You've become the keeper of continuity. One morning, a messenger brings a package. No sender. Wrapped in canvas and tied with silk thread the color of dried violets. Inside, a bound folio. Thin. Handmade. Inked by several hands. The title on the first page reads, Verses from the Dust, Fragments of the Fort Beyond Maps. Your hands tremble as you turn the pages. There, in her handwriting, is your poem. Not all of it, just the first 4 lines. And then others collected from walls, cots, drumheads, even a few you remember whispering in half-sleep. Some are yours, most are not, but each one carries a part of you. A sliver of that heat-soaked courtyard, a shimmer of that strange quiet she left behind. There's a note slipped into the back pocket, only 1 line. You lived as if you'd be forgotten. You won't be. You stare at it for a long time. Then you pick up your pen and begin copying, because that's what you do now. You preserve, you echo, you pass it forward. Soon, the men begin to bring you scraps, phrases, verses overheard, stories too odd to keep, a dream about a golden camel who spoke in riddles, a lullaby from the northern hills, a soldier's mother's prayer for good teeth. You write them all down. Then one evening, a young recruit barely 15, hands still soft, asks if he can learn. Learn what? You ask. To listen like you do, and write it right. You stare at him for a moment, then hand him the sparing pot. Start with the cook, you say. Ask him what he misses most. The boy runs off, wide-eyed. And just like that, the next version of you is born. You don't need a name in the scrolls. You don't need a statue or a song. You just need the story to keep going, and it will, long after your boots are dust, long after your ink fades, as long as someone listens, and someone writes, you'll never truly vanish. The years slip by grain, like sand in the folds of your sleeves. You no longer carry a sword. You carry stories gnawed out in ledgers, scratched behind cabinets, scrawled in the margins of requisition forms. You still manage the quartermaster's post, but the role has changed. They don't come to you only for supplies anymore. They come for poems, for memories, for answers to questions they don't know how to ask. One night, a soldier knocks at your door. He's young, skin sunburned from a recent march, eyes bright with the kind of pain that hasn't dulled yet. He doesn't speak, just hands you a crumpled cloth. Inside is a name. You recognize it instantly. A boy from the Hill Division, gone in last week's ambush. No body recovered. The young man stares at the floor. He used to write things. On the tent posts, on his sleeves. I think he wanted, I don't know, to be found. You take the cloth, smooth it gently, and say, he will be. That night, you write his name in your ledger, and beneath it, the line he carved once into his belt. If I vanish, remember I walk laughing. There are hundreds of such lines now, some long, some just a word, some not even written, only spoken, into the fire and remembered well enough to become verse. The commander has changed 3 times. The uniforms have shifted. The boots are softer, the drills more precise, the discipline less cruel. You like to think your stories had something to do with that. One of the scribes from the capital visits you once a year now. He brings ink, fresh parchment, and silence. You sit together on the roof after dusk, copying fragments under the stars. He never asks where they come from. You never explain. It's enough that they're written. Occasionally, he shows you where they've ended up. In temples and training manuals, carved along the edge of a ceremonial water basin in the Sultan's summer palace. To suffer in silence is survival. Reads one line you don't remember writing. But to sing it is to remain. You smile every time. One afternoon, long after you stop counting yours, you take a walk past the outer wall. A soft wind lifts the dust, and there, pressed against the foundation stone, is a sliver of folded paper. Violet thread binds it. You open it with slow hands. There's no ink inside. Only a pressed flower. Jasmine. Still fragrant after all this time. You sit down on the sun-warmed rock, place the flower beside your ledger, and close your eyes for a moment. You remember the rhythm of her voice, the warmth of the poem left near the well, the moment she made all of you visible. Historians will never agree on how much poetry truly shaped the inner lives of the sultanates. Soldiers, Some dismiss it as myth. Others admit it was a quiet force, a soft, stubborn pulse that outlasted the flags, the battles, the kings. But you know the truth, because you lived it, because you wrote it, because you listened. And somewhere, right now, a boy is carving his first verse into the bottom of his cot. And somewhere else, a woman with ink-stained fingers is unfolding the newest letter from a soldier no one remembers. But she will, because someone always does. So now, as the dust settles softly over the last stone walls and your cot creaks under your tired frame, you let your eyes close, not from weariness, but from fullness. There is nothing left to carry tonight. No sword, no scroll, no verse waiting in the wings of your memory. Just the hush of desert wind whispering through old courtyards, and the quiet warmth of stories finally laid down. The night is generous now. The stars stretch wide and loose across the sky like faded embroidery, stitched by hands too ancient to name. The moon, high and unbothered, watches with a silver eye as the ghosts of soldiers drift from their posts, not haunting, not grieving, just their present remembered. You can hear the faint rhythm of a drum somewhere, distant and low, someone keeping time for no one in particular. And in the softest edge of your hearing, laughter, a line of verse spoken by a familiar voice, the rustle of violet silk in the dark. There are no banners left to raise. No orders left to obey. Just breath and sleep, and the comfort of knowing that your words are out there tucked into walls, whispered in passing, waiting on lips that will never know your name, but feel your presence all the same. And that's enough. That's more than most ever dream of. So tonight, let yourself drift gently. Let the years fall away. Let the quiet take you warm as a letter passed in secret, soft as the edge of a ribbon, true as ink beneath your fingertips. You've done enough. You are carried. You are kept. You are home.